Ever since I was a little kid, I've been fascinated with cars and driving in general, so when my dad offered to take me out and teach me how to drive, naturally I was really excited, and I remembered how that made me feel. So after we had done that a few times and I got used to it, it didn't take me long until I looked for something a bit more exciting. And motorcycles seemed to be the natural option because for as long as I can remember, my dad had ridden a motorcycle, so I knew the ability to learn and practice was present and plentiful. I originally wanted to get into motorcycles because I thought they were cool, but I was completely unprepared for the lessons they would teach me further down the road. It started in my late preteen years when I asked my dad to get an old dirt bike out of the back of the garage that had been mostly forgotten about, and he was excited to see me interested in the same things he was interested in, so he agreed to get it out for me and gave me an aptly named crash course over learning the controls, and I had to be aware of throttle input, brakes, and clutch control. It was a lot to take in, but I knew it was something that I cared about and I thought was important, so I wheeled it out to a field that was by our house where I knew I would spend the next couple of weeks falling over, stalling, and burning myself. That's exactly what I did, but those couple of weeks taught me about persistence. There were times when I couldn't get whatever I was working on, and I was getting really frustrated with myself, but I just gritted my teeth and I kept trying because it was important to me. And I'm glad I did, because the feeling of riding at home rather than walking was overwhelmingly rewarding, and it was that day that I knew I had made a special connection. A few years later, I was finally old enough to get my motorcycle license, so I teamed up with my parents to get all the paperwork as well as a street legal bike in working order. As soon as I had passed my written and road tests, I knew that I had unlocked a whole new world for myself, and if I was going to make it in this new world, I had to accept one of the lessons that my bike had to offer, which was responsibility. More often than not, when I'm on the road, I've learned that drivers don't really see motorcyclists, so I have to always be ready and paying attention for anything that they might do that most people wouldn't expect. On a bike, there's ample opportunity to do lots of things that are convenient in the short term, but put me at risk, such as weaving in and out of traffic to get ahead of everyone, or finding an empty straightaway where you know in the back of your head that you have access to ridiculous speeds. But those opportunities at the same time taught me to think twice about my life off the road. It taught me to weigh risk versus reward and see if the long-term consequences weren't worth the short-term reward. I'd say I'm a fairly patient person, and I believe that motorcycles have strengthened that characteristic in me as well, because when a motorcycle is in a traffic jam, they could easily just go on the lane lines and go in between all the cars to get ahead of everyone. But because I'm unseen most of the time, a car could easily switch lanes unexpectedly, and I could hit them and be out a motorcycle or hurt myself or just have to deal with the headache of insurance. So that's taught me to know my place in life and not try anything that I'm not comfortable with so I can avoid the bad times. Something I learned really quickly is that a lot of people are offended by the presence of a motorcycle on the road and will try to create a toxic environment even when they're unprovoked. So that changed my outlook on life because I saw similarities between my life on and off the road. Because when I'm on my bike, I never know who's going to be a problem. The same rule applies to life, where I don't know who I'm going to have issues with. So that taught me to always be ready for the bad and to always have a plan to get out of it. If you know me, you know that conflict isn't really my game, and I can avoid it. I avoid it where I can, but I know how to handle it if I can't avoid it. And I give credit for that attribute to riding as well because of my experience dealing with angry people and either getting away from them or just finding ways to end the conflict. Overall, I think motorcycles have made me a better person with the lessons that they've taught me, but more than anything, I think that motorcycles have taught me that I can be in control of my life based on the way I act. If I were to ride irresponsibly, I could face dire consequences, but if I were to ride the way other drivers expect me to, my chances of going down are greatly reduced, and I think the same rule applies to my life as well. If I were to act crazy and take shortcuts and be irresponsible, I'd completely deserve the consequences that would entail, but if I were to be as precise and sure-footed as possible, I could live out a much happier, much more fulfilling life. Thank you.